Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is...
Jonathan Edwards.
How's it going?
That's going good.
I ask this question at the very start. How do we know each other?
Through the school, through University of Central Oklahoma. That both of us are in the composition program and got to, let's see, which class was that?
That was a theory pedagogy.
Yeah. That was fun.
I actually really did enjoy that class.
Same.
Although the elementary teaching stuff was probably more difficult for, I guess, both of us, since we were a little bit more detail oriented.
Yes. It was a little easy to get stack up too much work.
For
one, for what was supposed to be a 15-minute presentation.
Yeah.
Towards the end, it was getting like 45 minutes. Yeah.
All right. So, what do you do?
Well, a lot. I'm cellist and a composer, and beyond that, I do lighting and audio engineering and video work, and started picking up photography and working with LEDs, and day job is mostly running sound for places and being a piano technician. But that's kind of like getting a second bachelor's degree sometimes, because I've been doing that now for 5 years. I'm about to test for that. And so,
geez.
But it's, I have long background in science, and so it was just kind of my way of finding something to do that wasn't working a day job 9 to 5 somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the science side, since I have so many musicians on this podcast. What is your science background?
When I was in high school, I went to a school called the Classen School of Advanced Studies, which was a public magnet school in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
And it was split into two tracks, where you had the artistic track, and then you had what was called International Baccalaureate, which was just a different type of advanced placement type studies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the arts program, but they gave you full reign to enroll in any of the classes as long as you had the grades.
Yeah.
And so each semester, without even realizing it, I got an award at the end on my diploma. It was called the 4x4 something, but I took 4 elective science and math classes each semester throughout the year. And so it was, by the time I got done, I had taken 3 years of chemistry, 3 years of biology, 2 years of physics, psychology for a year, and astronomy and astrophysics, both in high school and as a college, like concurrent studies thing, and anatomy, physiology, and all those, and then took all the way up through calculus. And just because it was always a debate to me whether I wanted to go into astronomy or engineering or go into music. Mm-hmm. And I chose music because it just had the most freedom. That it was the chance to, when given the option to do anything, it's do what's the most, at least satisfying. And it's been a trip getting it to work, but especially as the economy's changed. But it's been kind of a trip of just over the years of really trying to learn just as much as I can about just as many subjects as I can, but in particular, I probably know as much as at least somebody with a bachelor's degree in astronomy or cosmology. I can do most of the math. But it's now I'm having at the point to where to proceed kind of in anything, I'm having to learn more programming. And that was the one thing that I wish I took back then with all those other courses, was just a computer programming class. And now I'm having to teach myself again. Yeah. And it's so full of applications now that since I know all the ways to apply it, it's now just sitting there going, okay, how do I take all these pieces and actually make something that works and is useful? And it's the same problem you run into in music. Just, you have all of these notes available, and it's, staff is nothing more than really just graph. And it's just, pitch over time. And then you have all the little elements that add the nuance to it. But you just, let's see. You find a problem, whether it's in your piece of music or in something you're trying to build, and it's just the same process of trial and error of coming up, walking yourself through the scientific method, whether you realize it or not. And it's amazing to me, especially now that I'm at the point to where it's starting to really manifest, that how much it all really does play together. And it's just been fantastic now that I've been in masters and gotten through the majority of it to where now I really get to start experimenting with all these new tool sets that I've learned through the school and through just on my own. And it's master's degree has definitely been worth it for me.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that if you, listener, if you have just like considered getting a master's degree, do it. Because it's like, it's not the full like 4-year dedication that it takes. It's really just like, here's some extra stuff that you just get to dive in a lot deeper. And you're already at the point to where I like this thing enough to keep pursuing it. And so that's kind of where your motivation is. Anyways.
Exactly. And it really comes down to, for the master's degree compared to bachelor's degree for me especially just felt like a perseverance test. Can you make it through it to the end? Because it just drags on. And by the time you're at year 4, for most of us, year 5, I made it to year 5 and got all of my classes done and found out the last, I was applying for graduation and found out I still owed them 4 credit hours of piano. And that's 2 years of private lessons. And I stacked it all in 1 year and just did piano for 40 hours a week. And oh, wow, did that hurt.
I'm sure you got really good at piano really quickly, though.
No, it was more that I got better at understanding what was happening as an instrument and why it's a percussion instrument. My professor really came at it from more of a composition standpoint, since that was my major. And he also was a kung fu master, which was just so much fun. But the first lesson though, he did the thing where you sit down and you play something, and they look at you and they tell you, I want to say this nicely, but you're doing it all wrong. And so we went through that, but this was the first time I'd had a class, or not a class piano. It was just me one-on-one with somebody with a doctorate, and he actually had 2, and was one in piano pedagogy and one in piano performance, if I remember right. But the first thing he did after chatting with me and finding out I had a physics background was pulled out the action of the piano and walked me through what was happening. And at that point, I had no idea about how a piano actually worked on the inside. And when you strike it and when you change your movements and add those nuance to your wrists and your hands and your understanding how your back connects to your fingertips, that through that process, it really got me to think much more physically about the piano as opposed to just playing it like a musical typewriter. Because in class piano, that's what you get. You get those same,
there are notes on
reasonably
the page.
inexpensive keyboards, and and it sounds like it does, and you just type it in, and it all comes out the same articulation because those pianos don't have great sample sets, and it just, it really made such a difference for me as a composer and as a musician to have that kind of a teacher, and that also is what got me interested in learning to repair instruments. And in high school, my day job, or I guess after school job, was working at a violin shop, repairing violins and basses, and violins, violas, cellos, and basses. And then I learned to fix guitars just on the side with refurbishing my own and helping people, set the levels on theirs. And so,
How did you get started doing music? What was the first thing that drew you in?
My parents were both advanced amateur to professional, depending on when you asked them over the course of my life. That my dad was he had a degree in electrical engineering, but he at night he would go out and play in jazz and blues bands, playing Hammond organ. And so as a little kid, I grew up sitting between his Leslie cabinet and the ride cymbal of the drum kit, just sitting there behind it. And so that was, that was one big side of it. And then on my mom's side, that she was church pianist and organist and was way better than, or is way better than she gives herself credit for, even now. But that now she picked up harp at 50, and now she's been doing that for the last number of years. And so, but I was, both of them went into other degree programs in music because, especially back when they were in school, it was much more, you do it this way or no way.
Right.
And so they just didn't, they wanted to actually enjoy it, in their own ways. And so for me, they were both really proud of me for, wanting to pursue music and everything. And
you're supposed to enjoy music school?
Yeah. And it does get hard sometimes, but, it wasn't that bad. It was more the things outside of school that end up dominating your life. And, it certainly did not spend all of my time practicing when I was in undergrad, but, I don't regret any of that time, but it definitely is one of those you do have to put in the time and can't just, go out and party and then have to work all the time to make up that difference and then hope that you're still going to do well in your lessons. And it's what causes so many people to drop out.
Yeah.
But
well, especially nowadays, because those loans keep going up.
Oh, they do.
The work, you just have to work more.
Yeah. And especially nowadays, just as wide as the market is, because there's no monolithic companies you go and get signed by. It's you just throw it out online and hope for the best. And but anyway,
it's not like you want to get signed by those monolithic companies anyways.
Oh yeah, no. Then you get shoehorned into a committee essentially. Just designed by committee, which
that poor yodeling kid.
Oh, I know. But then again, it's you sign up for what you want to sign up for when you get the choice, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And some people just take what comes, and sometimes you just have to know when to ask the right questions to make sure they're going to be a good fit for you. That almost any time you're working as a musician, you're interviewing them as your client, because if they're going to not take you seriously when you're talking in that first conversation about what they're looking for, then it's not worth going through the trouble and having to deal with all the changes down the road if they're trying to micromanage everything. But it's you just learn to work through it bit by bit and piece together an income. But your question was about my childhood. But
what is your primary instrument?
Primary instrument is cello.
Okay.
That I was started on piano when I was a kid, just to tie that in, at around 4 or so. It's my parents would of course have me noodling on stuff when I was a kid, just sitting there playing just noise. But I started messing with like my dad's synthesizers when I was about 4, and making like rainstorms and other just cacophonous stuff. But it was
and now you get to do it, but you're getting college credit for it. So
exactly. Oh yes, it is so great to just be able to like throw stuff at a page and then mess with it and then make it a little bit better and then go back and like insert it into something, and then you're like, I have a piece. It's so it's and like getting to do things that now that. One nice thing about knowing how to repair so many instruments and equipment as well, and soldering and all that kind of fun, is that when things break, you can fix it. But on the other side of it, that you can intentionally not necessarily break it, but quote break it, to get all sorts of different effects out of it, and not be worried about, if you do actually break it, to not be able to take care of it.
Yeah.
And so like with the piano, that it's there's some neat sounds you can get by adjusting some of the parameters of it. And it's, if you go too far, you can break hammers off and all that kind of stuff. And just being able to go back in there and just pop it off and put it onto a new hammer shank. And, it's so much fun. It's just how much time is there in a day.
Right.
Yep.
So what is your primary composition method? Do you start on piano? Do you just make noise?
It just depends on the day, what I'm writing it for. I have different practices for commercial and personal. Commercial work is honestly for me so much easier because it's when you have a good team that you're working with, that you have the script in front of you. It's not going to change 30 times before you hit the final export.
So this is scoring.
Yeah, it's so you can actually sit down and write it with a purpose. And on those, it just really depends on what it's for.
Yeah.
It's a lot of what I end up doing is sound design work in the end, is just making whatever the atmosphere to connect all the tissue of things together.
Exactly.
And just, when it comes to personal stuff, it's a bit of everything that I try to keep myself on my toes. And just, sometimes it's good to start at a piano and just come up with some chords or come up with a melodic line or just an interesting motive. And I do a lot of motivic work just because it's useful in just so many different ways to be able to build new rhythm sets and be able to build new melodic sets and break out of when you get in those patterns of sounding like you're making the same thing every time.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways that I like to do it is just literally cut up the piece of paper and rearrange it and flip some of them upside down, just all those ways to break not just writer's block, but monotony.
Yeah.
And, I went into composition without an intent to do a specific style, but more just what kinds of venue and display I'd want to have it performed in.
Yeah.
Of I like doing things with dancers in particular, that it's just so much fun to be an improviser and also be classically trained so much, so thoroughly that, when you're sitting there working with them, you can improvise something that they can then improvise off of, and you can stay consistent enough that they can actually start paying attention to their movements and do repetition. And, you're building a piece and a work together that is both performance art, but also can be recorded and then turned into all sorts of other things using video effects. And so, it's the training to do one thing can lead to all of the others just very easily by just putting in, the time and the dedication over just bit by bit every day over years, the same way that you write a symphony. You sit down, you put down 8 measures at a time if you have to, but given enough time, you'll finish it. And that's been kind of my working philosophy for being spread so thin, is just to bit by bit by bit by bit, and it does add up over time. And it's, the hardest part of life at the moment is, other than finances, of course, is just balancing that just time constraint of, you get home, you feel like you do want to lay down, and sometimes you do, and then you don't get back up in time to actually make something.
Sure.
But, when you can, you sit down and you just put it together piece by piece. And I like to do a lot of improvisation type stuff, because when you're just by yourself doing electronic and acoustic and trying to put together video with it, you have to just limit things down to what you can accomplish by yourself within a time limit that you learn to set. And,
oh, geez, it's 2 a.m. Maybe I should probably get some sleep.
Or, it'll only take me 5 minutes to set up. 30 minutes later. And learning to just make those decisions and stick to them, because tomorrow you can always come back and do something else. And so it's, I'd say most of the time I usually start, though, in terms of starting a composition, I'll start with an idea in my head, either something visual or textural, either audio, visual. And then I'll just sit down and try and make things that fit that, and then I'll pick from those. I usually will start with 3 or 4 different ideas, and then pick one, and then I'll start just working on it and adding some rhythmic variations to it, and see where it ends up within, say, like a 5-minute period.
Sure.
That way that you're not sitting there and rehashing it again and again, because that, especially in electronic music, you can spend an eternity trying to get that one thing to sound the way you want it. And sometimes it's just best to leave it be at okay. And I have problems with perfectionism in composition, that you want it to be good and you want it to be playable by people to where they'll actually enjoy it. And so you can sit there and you can go back and forth for 200 hours.
Yeah, wow.
And it may sound great, but you could do more sometimes. And so it's balancing that.
You always just keep touching that knob and
oh, I know.
Just a little bit more.
I could just roll this one or add this little bit of an effect, and then the computer crashes.
Sure. You talk a lot about the visual part of composition, and not a lot of people think that way, especially in music. So what is the importance, and why is the visual aspect important to you whenever you're making music?
When you go to listen to a concert, you're not just going to hear the music, you're going to see the performance as well. Like you're in the space. And so you have both the physical element of the sound literally reflecting off the walls and telling you about, the size of the space and the materials of it. And when the instrumentalist plays, in particular with instruments, you not only hear their instrument, you see it. And so you can see if it's a woodwind or if it's a stringed instrument, and those effects add into how you perceive the sound.
Yeah.
And so, like when as practice when you're a composer in particular, but if you're an instrumentalist, you go to a concert and you look at the performance, and if you practice, you can look at the individual performer and just watching their fingers listen for their specific sound and be able to pick them out of the ensemble.
Yeah.
And it's not just listening for, mistakes or anything. It's listening to how they play matching up with what you're seeing. And especially in percussion, that's where it's the easiest to see because you can actually see their hands. But when it comes to that, it's like when you go to a good master class in particular is where you can really sit there and watch them intently sometimes, and then ask questions afterwards that you can. There's so much information about the music that's being communicated visually.
Yeah.
Whether that's the emotion of the piece or the color and content and rhythmic aspects, you see that in the performer as they're moving with it. And even if it's just somebody sitting there by themselves in the middle of the stage as a solo performer standing, if they're a vocalist or, something along those lines, that adds so much to the sound of it in your head, and in the audience's head. And so as a composer, I try to think about the production side of it, not as a ends in and of itself, but just as a opportunity to add in things that make it more enjoyable for the audience and for the performers, because otherwise, to an extent, what's the point? There's a place for experimental music. I love doing just experimental noise stuff, but in a performance setting, you're trying to connect with the audience, but as the composer, you're also trying to connect with the performer, because they're trying to get in your head, but it's fun to try and get in theirs before you've ever met them. Of just imagining what they would think playing through your piece, and so I try to approach it from that side, but also, even though I'm not like synesthetic in the normal sense, that to me, it's I can very much analogize sound as color. And you can kind of get a sense of that in the different noise types of, you have white noise that everybody's familiar with, and there's pink noise, and people are pretty familiar with that, but you can also tune it to blue, red, brown, and that really is just which end of the spectrum it's favoring, high or low, in the same way that blue light is a shorter wavelength than red light. And so for me, it's, I try and think of it through those kinds of pathways. And it started off as just as much as anything as a way to break writer's block when I was having a hard time figuring out why this chord didn't work when this one should. And it's just those little things of, where are you centering your sound? and does it match with what's going on in the other places? And so it's, I try and think of it as much as, visual as, a painter would, looking at the canvas and moving across it. And sometimes that comes out to great effect, and sometimes it's just a fun exercise that didn't work, it just, but in terms of talking about music, I like to use physical things as an analogy for, especially trying to help a performer to think about a passage in a way other than just the way they were trained musically. And it's an interesting exercise. It's not like a fully refined kind of thing. Sure. It's just a way of doing it in a different fashion. Yeah. And now that I've gotten more into the producing video and lighting and all of that kind of stuff, that it's nice to have a way to also express musical thoughts in a new, physical type way. Yeah. And so it's been interesting.
So you're also kind of a tinkerer.
Very much so.
So what stuff do you make, and then how does that sort of make its way into your music, or not even, if you don't even care if it involves your music at all?
Well, I try to make things more inclusive when I can. It mostly comes down to time and processing power on my computer to what I can accomplish, but bottlenecks, you run into them, and then you just have to plan around it and figure it out. But a lot of what I've been doing recently is, of course, the piano work, as pianos are just phenomenal sets of parts. Yeah. And so a lot of what I've been doing outside of that is developing new instrumental sounds. That one of the upright pianos that I currently have was just not good enough to fix, but it still had a good soundboard and all the other materials to it. And so what I've done is stripped it out and made it just the bare plate, in the overall cabinet, so that it can stand up. And what I'm going to do now is cut out the key bed and then cut out some of the strings and use it as a way of increasing the resonance of percussion instruments, found percussion and legitimate percussion. Yeah. And doing things like anchoring directly to the soundboard or to the bridge, and to not damage the soundboard. But just using materials that I otherwise have from work, or just things that I've collected over time, and finding new ways to use them. And the other thing is that pianos are full of all these little tiny pieces and joints and, just all these little pins. And so one thing that I'm looking at doing here soon is making what would kind of be an inside-out puppet, but it's kind of industrial light and magic type stuff like you would see in, the Star Wars from Lucas when he started that, of essentially animatronics and trying to find ways of manipulating a physical space that a camera can look into and create a combination, in the same way of creating electroacoustic music, of creating physical, practical, and graphical visuals just all in one thing, so that you just stick the camera in, and the LEDs and other little, OLED screens and stuff that are being moved around by the parts will then reflect, throughout it and cause new shadows and make it look like something that you spent ages, working on in After Effects, but really was just,
a real
building the thing. Yeah. And then there's neat things you can do with that with projection as well. And so, everything's just kind of finding ways of bringing in all of these disparate elements that I've learned over the years into something that makes use of them, because I've enjoyed learning them and it's fun to use them too. Yeah. Sometimes, you just grab a microphone after you do something and you're like, that was the strangest sound I've ever heard. And you go back and record it, and then you can sit down and play with it afterwards. Sure. And when you're working with your hands on stuff, you find new ways of using materials. Like working with like drum heads is something of just that goat skin or fake, depending, that if you stretch it over different shapes and different like vases are fun, where you can sit there and stretch a little bit over and just secure it with a little rubber band or something, and you create a whole new sound that you otherwise didn't have. And so I approach it kind of from that direction. Yeah. And also, things like Winter Garden, I may be mispronouncing his channel name, but the guy who did the giant marble machine, he's currently building the next one. I think it's the 10th iteration. And it is just absolutely phenomenal, but it's amazing how many piano parts are used in making those. But he also has a CNC machine and all the rest of that. Someday. CNC machine and 3D printer will just change my life someday. Sure. Especially just the more programming I learn. Like when I'm talking about the animatronic stuff, it's some of it you can sit there and control with your hands, but also been learning a program, it's Max MSP. And it is...
Oh, yeah, that's just a 3D rendering.
No, Max MSP is a enormous box of tools that you can... It stands for max signal processing is what MSP stands for. And it has different things built into it where you have your audio generators, your visual generators, and computer graphics generators. It can also be used for scientific tools, that it's kind of like Audacity in that way, where it has all of these neat ways of visualizing data. But the main thing about it is that you can take any signal and turn it into anything else. So you can take visual stuff like a video clip, and then you can have it reinterpret that as audio or vice versa. But you can also take audio signals and make it to where, like, as you raise in pitch, robotics things, start happening. You can also use it for like controlling laser projectors and drones, and it's kind of like learning a programming language that already has modules that have been built into it for 25 years or more. But it has one heck of an audio suite, and in terms of visual stuff, I mostly use Adobe. I got tired of Final Cut just because it's starting to feel more like iMovie. In terms of the granularity of what you can control. And so I've mostly been using Adobe, and that's mostly just because you can toss things back and forth between the programs without having to export constantly. But when you sit down with Max, though, you can set it up to where it automatically generates emergent things. So you can tell it whether it's an audio signal to layer in effects as you hit... you hit middle C the third time, and then it adds in the delay, and then you hit it another, third time, and then it adds in the next effect. And you can set it like that, where you can, in fact, Radiohead, if I remember right, does most of their stuff, or did most of their stuff in the early 2000s in particular, is what I know about, at least with it, because that's when I first learned about it. Yeah. That they used Max, and they would set it up that way. And it would be controlling their lights and their audio and other staging elements. And it mostly is just if you have a computer that's fast enough to handle it, which mine is just at that cutoff to where I can play with it, but too complex, it just breaks down. But it's kind of that linchpin to being able to make a full stage production work as a solo artist without having to pay and hire a bunch of people, which has its place. That you can't do everything all the time and have it be the way you want it to be.
You got the scales of time and money.
Which is a huge factor. And especially, I just finally got on social media after a few years just taking a step back. Just, in undergrad was when Facebook hit for me. And that was a different thing when parents started getting on there. When they opened that up, and I was like, oh, close it down. And kind of left it sitting there for a while, just until I got to a point in life where I had something to share other than just ideas. That for me, it's, especially learning all of this, it's taken so much time that you don't always have things at the level that you want to be able to share it at. And for me, it's taken a while to get used to just making process videos. And I'm looking forward to making a lot more of that kind of educational content. Because it's an endless rabbit hole when you just try and do all of it yourself.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you do just have to hire other people, and finding collaborators that you can work with is difficult because, if they're doing a large amount of work, you want everybody to get paid. And sometimes, you're not getting paid until time after time has passed. And so it's always a challenge of just balancing that time and money aspect.
I was misremembering what Max was, and I'm like, oh wait, I've used Max. There's actually, I don't know if you use Ableton.
Yes.
And
I'm looking forward to being able to put those together. And I don't really have a DAW of choice at this moment. And it's strange to say that after all the years of using Logic, but I've tried all of them at this point, and all of them just
they do
have
different
drawbacks.
things differently.
And but still, the favorite one that I ever used back in the day was FL Studio, and it was FL3 or 4.
They're at FL10 now.
Yeah, and it was the most developed at the time for the kind of electronic music my friends and I were trying to make. But now a lot of what I do is just, sometimes in Logic, sometimes I'll do it in Adobe, sometimes I'll use Ableton, and it just comes down to what I'm trying to do with it. But since Max works directly with Ableton,
Ableton 10 now has Max just in it.
Also, Ableton 10 now has 3D and VR support. So you can now do 3-dimensional audio, which is one of my end games that I totally want to get to, is doing virtual reality content, whether it's audio content or visual content, that there's so much more freedom that then you can do by being able to transfer the sound around the space. And being able to do that in a live setting allows you to do, you watch something like Cirque du Soleil or something where it's all around you and above you visually, but the audio is still coming from a set of speakers at the front of the stage.
Sure.
And there's some of these audio systems now, and Cirque du Soleil probably has better audio systems in their stuff than just at the front.
They have the money for it, but you'd be surprised at some places.
Oh, I mean, you go into some places and you just, you spend $40 million on a facility, and then you put in like $20,000 in, speaker equipment, and you wonder why it sounds bad and nobody wants to come. And, the people who write up the stuff don't always have the final goal of what it should be capable of in mind. And that ends up limiting them. And, it's, as a sound technician, when I go to other places and use their equipment, that it's always this, just game of like, okay, what shortcuts do I have to make? And that's, and I guess, it's, for me, it's part of the fun.
Sure.
But, it does get frustrating sometimes of having to, cut corners, but that is how you learn how to make more with less. And, it's, you're sitting in my studio, and it's, as you kind of notice that a lot of things are modular, and I can pop them off and take them out and move them around. And that kind of stuff is not what you find in most facilities. And
they stick a thing and it stays there.
And for the kind of stuff that, especially the current, type of stuff where you're trying to mix media and mix disciplines constantly, that you need things to be to where you can make sure that when you take it apart, you can put it back together in a new fashion and it'll still work as you intend it to. And that kind of reliability takes just a lot more practice and skill than most places are willing to pay somebody to even consult on. And so you get, these small little recital halls sometimes, or large performance venues, where you look at the setup and you're just wondering why they made those decisions. And a lot of times it just comes down to financing and, the people think, it's not knowing about what you don't know. And so it's kind of just amazing how much there is to know about any of the given fields in performance.
Sure.
And in post-production. Post-production. That's one nice thing about Max that I'm trying to learn to use it for, is being able to set up generative video content where I can drop in series of pictures, because I have tens of thousands of images I've taken over the years, like everybody else. And now that I have a full, 6K camera that can take, just hyper real photos, that it's, I want to be able to drop those in and then give it a set of parameters for its effects, and you can design your own effects modules and everything. And
Max gets deep.
Yeah. Oh, it does. and then I just found out, finally going through some of the written tutorials, the reference tutorials. I've done enough playing with it now, and just diving through the help menus occasionally when something's not working, that now when I'm going through the tutorials, of which there's like 500 chapters, that you sit there and you can actually look, or I sit there and I can look at it and know not just what they're talking about, what applications it has.
Yeah.
And for me, just being able to sit down and set parameters and all of that, of like min max on things, and have it respond to the timbre and to the the color of the sound and the amplitude, that that really just it opens up so many possibilities for what kinds of visuals you can do. And I'm significantly colorblind, and so for me, I can do decent color balancing and stuff and making things look normal and healthy. But mostly I try and take the first shot the first time, so that, correctly the first time. So that people don't come out green or red or blue, because it's not fun for me, being colorblind, to go back and try and do that kind of stuff. That it's easy for me to make strange and abstract visuals, but it's fun using Max now to create kind of like Google Deep Dream type images. And it's at this point, it really is just running into the processing bottleneck of, when you're using a laptop, can't do much. And it has a video card in it, but it's only like a 256. Even though it's only a 2-year-old laptop, it's still, laptops can't do what a desktop can. But luckily with gaming PCs, that's dropped the price down so much, and Bitcoin and all that, to make video cards cheap enough. So,
Are you still using a Mac, or?
I have a Mac and a PC. Okay. They're both laptops. And so
I was about to say, you might as well just migrate to a PC at this point.
And the Mac is 7 years old. Okay. So at this point, it still does audio fine, but you can't, for a hope, do video or anything of any higher level processing to it. And one downside of that is that the Mac ProRes video codec is only on Mac, and the PC equivalent is okay, but it's the one downside, because H.264, you get all this banding and stuff.
We're getting in the weeds, but
anyway. So anyway, but I can't remember what your question was.
No, it's fine. This is the point.
I'm very good at rambling coherently enough to where there's content.
Yes.
There's a lot of interesting things, but I can get very technical and not realize it. So
I enjoy tangents.
Good. Good.
So on to the different segment of the podcast, where I ask heady philosophical questions. What is the role of religion or spirituality in your life?
Well, that's a big, wide question, like it is for most people. For me, it's kind of similar to my science background of I was raised in Methodist church in particular, and I still work at a Methodist church that I run sound at. It's a large church that on the books, 8,000 or so members. On a weekly basis, though, 3,500, which is good.
Yeah.
But the church has a full orchestra, and about on average Sunday, 80 to 100 person choir. And I'm getting to live mix an orchestra and choir and all of the service and everything else. And it's something I enjoy very much. And it's a church that does a lot of actual physical outreach to the community and does a lot of things, which that is the most important thing to me. And so in my childhood, I was brought up in the Methodist church, and my mom was a church musician. And so she was one of the two pianists, and she would also play the organ and do some handbells. That I was constantly in the church every Sunday and many times during the week for rehearsals, and went through the phases of love and burnout with religion. just broadly, just the practice of religion. And that's been an ongoing cycle throughout life, because that's the same with all of the things that I do. Of at certain points, I get to where I have to move on to something else for a while to be able to come back to it with an appreciation. And so for me, with a lot of the religious practice, that started to get wearing out on me before my dad migrated from being more or less non-religious to semi-militant atheist-ish. It was more he just had problems with the church than he did with the beliefs. But he, at one point after my parents split when I was young, went pretty hardcore evangelical suddenly, and started playing, even though he was jazz musician, started bringing that and his Hammond and everything to their church. And as that church grew, that there more and more, and so I was there more and more. And I've seen the best and the worst, at least in terms of Christianity, from behind the scenes, from numbers of different denominations and churches, because he started off evangelical, and my mom and I started off at a Methodist church, but both parents migrated to different places after they divorced. And so I got a very broad exposure to all of the different major denominations and many of the other little sub-denominations of Christianity. And after I turned 16, really, that I started making it a bigger point to go outside of middle-class-ish white people churches and go to the just anybody else's church of any ethnic group or just community to get a different experience, and with that different religions as well. And I made it a real point, being just somebody who likes knowing things, of did a lot of studying of most of the aspects of the major religions on earth, and many of the other smaller ones, and the little just what would otherwise be the occult, but just to know what humanity has done. And so for me, it really started to become more of a deeper focus on the works and not the words. And for me, it's words. The words are definitely important, to anybody's religious beliefs, but it's really what you do with that understanding, that knowledge, those thoughts, those philosophies, and how you practice that. And so for me, it's I love religious discussions and love the debates, but there's a lot of the week by week Sunday school kind of discussions that I got very just tired of. And so for me, it's, kind of my religious beliefs are still rooted in Christianity, but have come to incorporate just the broad understanding in humanity of, if we give even half a crap about each other, that we can do so much more together than we can apart. And, being behind the scenes in churches is another one of those things of, it's a weekly production every week. You have music, you have acting, in the sense of people are getting up and public speaking no matter how they feel inside that day. And, you're working with all of these different, people, and it's not just a one person gets up and says what they believe kind of thing. It's a massive undertaking, depending on the size of the church.
And then repeatedly.
And so for me, since I have all of these skills that I have, that one of my ways that I like to give back is doing things like, weddings and funerals and all that. But in particular, I like to help with funerals because I've performed and been not counting attendance, but I've performed in and worked for more than 500-ish funerals. I mean, and so enough to be, have been around them more than most, people. And because of that, I've seen people at their, kind of worst moments so often, that for me, it's a way of giving back and a way of doing that. And so for me, I try really hard to be more on the actual like doing good work side.
Yeah.
Than I do actually talking,
Right,
in terms of like, going around and posting on Facebook of, just that's not where I feel I can make the most impact. And also that doesn't feel as true to me in terms of, I like people to ask. I don't like to just go out and tell people this is it. This is what I like to actually, have a conversation. Exactly. And you don't often get that when you go around, I don't know, being more aggressive with it.
Yeah.
That it's, especially being in the evangelical side of it and different versions, it's such a broad, but at the same time, some of them just took it way too deep into the just aggressive territory. That it just ended up becoming more of almost a vice to their message. And so if I have issues with anything, it mostly comes down to how churches are organized and structured and how they operate than it is about any given church's message. But, I have my groups that I disagree with more than others. Sure. But, and, I've also spent time, reading the other biblical texts that weren't included or were cut out or, in the first couple of centuries and also during the Carolingian era in the 800s in Gaul that became France. Yeah. Oh, they did so much to change things. One funny thing, just on the subject of religion, is that I've noticed in music is that being a music major, you can see every major political and religious change before and after it has changed in the music and the way that it is used in those institutions. In particular, the Catholic Church. And it's amazing how much Catholic liturgy we have to learn as musicians. But it's amazing also just how important it was that they wrote it down. Yeah. Even if they didn't know how to read it, these scribes were still copying these things. In fact, most scribes couldn't read. They were just copying the visualization on the page. And so that's where you get all these mistranslations and words that in one copy and another are different. And some of that's just copy error of just somebody not actually being able to read it, but just copying it. And
an E or an A. I don't know what that is.
I don't know. Yep. Oh, but yeah, it's been a journey in terms of my religious beliefs that I don't have for the most part, it's like I said, I'm still grounded in Christianity in that way in terms of just the beliefs and the text and all of that and the practice. But overall, it's always been this, I don't fit to any one particular sect because when I read things, I like to break them apart into all of their pieces and meanings. And I found things that just did not line up with others. And so, I have my own interpretations and usually they're different enough to where I try not to have, religious conversations where it's going to have an impact on, later kind of thing, because sometimes I can offend people just because it's, so much of what I see is in the practice and not the practice of being a better person and a better human than just going to, service every Sunday and saying hi. And it's, and it's also with my physics understanding and everything. It's one of those I always had so many problems with, especially certain communities, creating and manifesting a non-existent war between science and religion. That for me, that does not and has never existed. It's in people's just personal interpretations of things that it becomes this internal conflict that manifests because usually people don't understand something that they're talking about, whether it's on the religious side or the scientific.
Right.
And, considering how many different orthodoxies there are just within Christianity and interpretations, that it's, one group will have a problem with something that another doesn't all the time, inevitably. But it's, especially with physics and cosmology, it's one of those things of there's nothing that gets in the way of there being a extra universal deity that is probably in reality more alien than anybody's concept of what a God could be, whether it's an individual or pluralistic or anything. Sure. That it's, it's the universe is far stranger than we ever gave credit for over most of our, the last 100 years. Even. It's amazing how much we've learned. And if nothing else, it just illuminates more of what is. And so for people who are more deeply religious, to me, it's just in no way learning about the creation should be a detriment. And yet people try and manufacture arguments for why there should be some kind of, why something is lost, when to me, learning about something and knowing more about it should be the step towards that understanding, just to be able to see where things do meet. Because sometimes it is so far distant, it's hard to see where those lines cross. But sometimes, you just have to go searching for it. Yeah.
I like that a lot. Awesome. I tend to ask these direct questions for the sake of really just answering the question. So, first one, God, question mark?
Like I kind of said, it's to me, there's the personal God that people believe in and they hold in their heart, that goes with them on their journeys, no matter what kind of God it may be, or other just, thing that is not them, that exists within their soul or as a reflection of them that they, feel connected to. To me, it's one of those that the most people's interpretation of God to me seems too human.
Sure.
And it's just that casting of one's own humanity onto something that's not from Earth, that's not from necessarily even our universe in that sense. Just whether it's a power or a force or a, being manifest, that to me, it's to define that takes away from it. And so for me, it's one of those, if God is just the universe and the, connections between the stars manifest in the same way that our neurons create us, or in that sense are connected to us and what we are. You notice I try and meander around a little bit to not step on too many toes, but it's more just for the actual, like, it really is that middle ground of, I have the feelings of connection to, the world and the universe that I interpret in my own way as, a connection to God, but to, just a larger extent, I view it in the same way that I view my understanding of, physics and cosmology is it's bigger and weirder than we could have ever imagined. And especially when you consider that, the human brain and the brains of other animals is more complex than all of the stars in the universe. It's the most complicated thing that exists, especially when you bring in consciousness and, the soul, and however you interpret that. And so it's this, it's hard for me to sit there, and say like, oh yes, there is a God and he's this. And why is it a he, or why is it a she, or why is it an it? Because it may not even have a reference point when you leave the world that we perceive in. And also just with all my understanding from psychology, and my ex-wife was a psychology major, and during the years that she and I were together, that I learned even more just reading through her textbooks of most of what we perceive in our day-to-day life could be compared to just a hallucination that we give credence because it's all in our head. The physical world exists. The things that you touch exist. They don't exist in the way that you perceive them. There are wavelengths of light you can't see, and just the same as there are sound waves that you can't hear because they're outside of the range. And just things that you, like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, there are some things you cannot know all the answers to because that just doesn't work. It's amazing how much quantum mechanics made me just have to come to terms in peace with chaos.
Where's the particle? Yes.
Yes, yes, yes is right. Is the particle is the particle
is the particle.
Side tangent. One of the coolest things that I did learn recently is that they created a new state of matter. That is, they made two electrons pair up, kind of in a analogous way to like what a nucleus is. If they got close enough to where they were paired, didn't combine, and then they removed one. And that hole continued to, where the electron was, continued to behave as if it was an electron. Because technically all electrons are one field, and that gets way more complicated.
Yeah.
Quantum field theory, if you really want to just break your mind. It's, the things that they learn every day. And like there's a new fourth state of neutrino that they have enough evidence to know where it is, but not what it is. And that, it's so much fun. And so, I spend a lot of time watching science videos as my time kill, but I also watch plenty of, cartoons and sci-fi, and especially sci-fi horror. And it's a rabbit hole.
We can go on later about Black Mirror. Anyways, and then the other one is free will ? Which is another.
That's another one of those that especially with the psychology side and the neuroscience side, is so many neuroscientists that I've heard talk, especially recently, is the more we learn, the less reason for free will we find. There's so much that when you break it down statistically across entire populations and just with individuals monitoring habits over time, that these are neuroscientists. They want there to be free will because they want to feel like they have free will, because we all, hopefully, well, most of us, I'm sure there are some, but there's no concrete evidence yet for what makes free will. And I like to believe I have free will, because otherwise, why would I do all of these things that I do?
Sure.
And why, it kind of comes down to, it's when you make a decision to something, if you at least add in the probability kind of side of things, of if you can flip a coin, at least then, you may feel like it one way or another. that is a, expression of free will, of I flipped the coin and then followed the decision or didn't.
Sure.
But, it's scientifically, it's still a very open-ended answer. And it's like I said, I like to feel that free will exists, but I know that just what has been studied and peer reviewed, and peer review is so important. That just we don't actually know, and so it's an open-ended question for me until more happens. But I like to believe. And I do a lot of that kind of separating in my stuff of just what I believe versus what I know to be true for humanity that we have tested. And to me, that's part of what defines science is it's why it doesn't conflict with religion in the way that people manufacture, is that in science, you test it. You go back and you test it. You go back and you test it again. And then you test it again. And somebody else tests it. And you build up that volume to say, this is what we know because we have made sure that it's reliable and that it doesn't change. And the universe may change in some ways. We still don't know. But it's, there are some things that like quantum field theory is one of those things of like every time we test it, every experiment that has ever been run can be explained through quantum field theory, and it's always right. It doesn't make sense to us in our way of visualizing the world and how we think of it. I mean, it is a weird soup of just chances of stuff existing and not existing and not existing being existing. And but it's there's so much ambiguity left and so many questions left to answer that at a certain point you have to be honest with yourself, to at least in my opinion, to say that this is what I believe versus this is what not just I, but we as humanity know to be true. And or at least know to be supported. because you don't prove anything except for in mathematics. You do a geometric proof, that is a proof, a literal proof. There is, outside of that, it's all just supporting evidence. That there's, for anything, there's always a chance that in one spot in the universe, it could be different. And so, especially with Stephen Hawking's last paper that I skimmed over, it was one of the 3 or 4 that he published just before he died. And it was about that we may not even have to have multiverses in the sense of like bubble universes that bump up against each other, or brains that meet and layer like sandwich bread. Instead, it could also be a kind of midway between that, where it's like panels layered over each other in a 3-dimensional set, where the universe could be big enough on its own to not outside of the observable universe, because there's the observable universe where light has had time to get to us. And then outside of that, it's this, just big question mark, but it's there. Because just by the expansion rate of the universe, it should be where we're around like 13.7, if I remember right, billion years inside the observable bubble. The observable event horizon. The outside of that, it's something like 48 billion, just at minimum, light years across. But it could essentially go on forever, to where the universe can be big enough that you can have pockets within it that are their own coherent space-time. Or, with their own changed rules of physics, but they're still in one contiguous plane, in the same way of, drawing a squiggly line, or going outside and looking at, or actually looking at a topographical map. Our part of the universe is flat, because inflation sped it up so fast that quantum scales, went from the size of an atom to the size of, the moon, or, whatever the actual scale is, that they expanded so fast that it stretched all of that out to what is effectively a flat space, and that when you shine a light, it goes in a straight line unless it encounters a gravitational field, or it encounters, electromagnetic field or anything, that its light will travel in a straight line. If it was a curved universe, it wouldn't. It's the simple description is you take a triangle and you draw it, and you have, each of your angles of 60 degrees in an equilateral triangle. But if you push up in the middle of it and draw it up into the 3rd dimension, or that you end up increasing the size of that angle. And so you would have light that bends around naturally, and you'd have lensing without actually having gravitational lensing effects, and the night sky would look so trippy. But, it makes a fun visualization. But yeah, with all that.
All of those tangents. I have 3 more questions for you. One, what makes you happy?
Life. One thing we haven't talked about is mental health and all of that, in that sense of just, for me, I've always had clinical anxiety disorder and depression, but the depression was never that like emotionally depressed. I'd get emotionally depressed, of course, but it's more the behavioral aspects of depression. And combine that, those 2 things combined, plus maybe some attention stuff here and there. But, it's more just you become who you are kind of thing. And for me, it's been hard getting to where I am, a lot of 80-hour work weeks, and then going this class, kind of thing. Like I said, I was married, and that wasn't a result of the work that I do or that she did. It was just personal separating off, going different directions, because it just wasn't going where we wanted it to. But, all of those things, layer by layer, I can say that most of my adult life, I've been happy. Especially after undergrad. Undergrad was hard. Just working, I got caught in the debt trap and had to work full-time alongside school, and, just layering all those together, that it's, and especially with like my religious background and all that, of having explored so thoroughly, but also been so involved behind the scenes, that, it got me to where I started finding happiness where I found it, and in things, in the little things, and what's around. And definitely learning has always been a huge source of happiness.
Yeah.
Going on walks in nature, seeing beautiful things, hearing people perform and express themselves. But just also the little things of just sitting down on a sunny afternoon and just looking at the clouds.
Yeah.
Or like laying in here and laying in the studio and turning the lights on, to different colors so that they sit there and cycle through, and then just watching a reflective surface and studying how the light moves across it. Just those little kind of, this universe exists and I get to exist in it.
Yeah.
And to me, I just rearranged life to where that could be a source of happiness and wasn't just a, fun little hippie kind of thought, but instead was really a chance to, just appreciate everything about life that is worth celebrating, and there's so much to celebrate. And so, I really try very hard to find happiness in, everything from what I do for work to what I do for fun and everything in between. And some of that's also, so many, when we're composers and musicians, our job is other people's hobbies. And that sometimes ends up being to where we don't feel like we have a hobby because our work becomes both.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's a grind, and sometimes you get burnt out.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in school slogging it through, But the, it's just a lesson in, perseverance in terms of just being able to look at the world for all of the horrors and atrocities and still find what beauty you can in there while trying to change the situation that led to the atrocities if you have the power to. To try and make the world a better place by just giving half a damn about your fellow humans. It's amazing how much can happen when we all care a little bit about each other. And also just kind of related to a number of things, but also another tangent is that when it comes down to it, just any kind of artistic pursuit, that I've been doing a lot of research and building up kind of my catalog of trying to be able to go out and talk coherently on a stage in front of people who aren't artists and musicians about why they should explore music, why their parents and grandparents should explore music and art, not just music, but art, dance, whatever floats you. But especially in children, because at any age, it has an effect on your ability to retain information and empathize with others and all the rest of that. But more than anything, it's a practice of not just falling into a routine in a way that allows you to keep yourself growing and not becoming just rooted and complacent, because complacency is an easy way to end up in the realm of just the world that you don't want to live in and don't want to see manifesting. And so, it doesn't, rely on beliefs or anybody, it's you express yourself or what you're trying to. And so, it's just absolutely anything from writing down 2 pages of poetry every week to playing for 5 minutes a day on your instrument. It's the closer you can get to about half an hour seems to be that point at which it has the most benefit at any age. But, it's things like, slowing the rate of Alzheimer's and stuff, and like reducing like, the effects of harmful things like seizures and things, that it's just being involved in different kinds of arts and spending some time every day, just trying to even have fun with it. And just explore something new is just the best thing you can do for your brain, and music in particular. That you sit somebody under an fMRI scanner and they start playing an instrument or beatboxing or rapping or whatever it is, that more than anything else, it lights up your entire brain like a Christmas tree, right and left, physically, emotionally, all of it, from the frontal cortex all the way to the deep, little, ancient brain down buried in the middle. That, it's always healthy. And so it's, I try and promote that. And the more that I the closer I get done with my master's, that I'm trying to set myself up to do advocacy for STEAM education and art therapy in particular. Just because, my own background can be most summed up by being a STEAM educated individual of, I took science, technology, engineering, and mathematics courses, but that arts part has to be in there because, like I said early on, of just everything you do in composition and creation, and whether it's no matter what the medium or discipline, relies on the same thought process that you use in science. And it feeds back and forth all the time. And it's amazing to me how many artists that I find out have like degrees in ecology or in biology or in astronomy. And, it's just, this is their fun. And sometimes it becomes their living. And then they do the other for fun. Because you can now be a citizen scientist in ways that you just couldn't thanks to the internet. All the exoplanets that were, discovered by people sitting there just clicking through on the page. Through the data. And so it's for me, I try really hard to always in everything incorporate that kind of idea to just promote people just trying to learn to create things because it is a learning process. You aren't, not everybody is born being able to just manifest things out of their head. And I've known a lot of musicians who just sit there and tell me like, I can't write or I can't, play jazz or improvise and it's a practice. Everything, if you put in a little bit of time every day, you will see improvement. Like right now, I am still bad at hula hooping in terms of like the dance style with it, but it's so pretty. It's hard not to play with. And also I have a thing as a composer, author kind of thing of I don't want to ask somebody to do anything that I would be uncomfortable trying myself.
Sure.
And so for, any of my, works that way that I feel like I can actually empathize and connect with my performers or actors or whoever they are, to help them to feel comfortable in a situation that they may not with, that may push them and expand them and help them grow, but without, leaving scars, emotionally or, physically. Cause like doing horror stuff, like if you don't have the kind of lack of sensitivity to it, it can be very affecting to actors, to be in those situations and have to do the same scene 4 or 5 times. That's just hard. And that also happens with non-horror type stuff of just stage acting. Like some of the parts of Shakespeare that are so damn intense can leave lasting effects on people. And so it's good to try and do something that you're not comfortable with when you're writing it for other people to do. And if nothing else, it makes you a better writer. It's like taking an instrument that you haven't, taken to be able to write better for, like, say, double reeds. Just to know how hard it is to squeeze down with both your lips on a pencil. And then still be able to blow through it. And when I was in undergrad, I took probably 12 credit hours or more of different instruments, other than percussion and voice. I took 3 semesters of voice in undergrad and 2 of percussion, just to have a better idea of how to write for it in terms of percussion, and then how, as a singer, just some more training, because I'd mostly been a choir singer or, in other kinds of non-professional music type scenarios. And so,
I was going to ask, what advice do you have for people, but you kind of already gave it.
Learn. Just learn. Don't be afraid to learn, and to try and create something in a field you're not comfortable with. For me, especially growing up in churches, being a male, that dance was not something that was open to me. So I got to take martial arts, and I did a lot with that, because it was, I took Aikido, which is the Japanese, very flowing, fluid kind of style. And then later, it's so much fun. And then later picked up a lot of weapons arts and melee weapons in particular. And then learned, or started taking Tang Sudo, which is the Korean style. And it's also very similar to Shotokan, which is a Japanese style. And it's much more heavy, blocky, hard hitting, and kind of in the same way of music, of like learning to play in different eras of music and different styles.
Yeah.
In the same way, you begin to be able to mix and match and piece it together.
Mm-hmm.
And dance was always a fascination for me that I didn't get to, explore legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always have loved going to, watch dancers and getting to work with them, because I see music fluidly in that way as movement. Because, to me, like one of the things that makes me a good audio engineer, in terms of fixing and problems and troubleshooting, is being able to walk into a room and visualize accurately how the sound is going to reflect around
it.
And when you're a performer, that changes where you sit in the room. When you're a composer, that changes how you write for the room, when you know the venue ahead of time. Especially in electronic music, because then that's everything. But yeah, it's just that act of creation and taking the time day by day to put in just 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you have, to just practice overcoming the blank page problem of what do you start with. And you just have to practice just starting. And like, I'm also not a very talented visual artist in terms of being able to draw. I can do neat things. It's like kind of like not being able to play an instrument well, but having all the composition knowledge.
Sure.
I can make relevant noise, relevant sounds. And in terms of visuals, I can make things that fit, but I can't just sit down and sketch out a house and be like, this is my dream home. I can't do something like that. Or this is how I want this set piece to look. I have to sit there with a ruler and a straight edge and do that. And I do practice some freehand drawing occasionally, but that's just, it's never anything good, to me at least. But at the same time, it's the practice of just doing one thing at a time. And like when I compose or sit down for my half-hour kind of sessions of just to improvise and everything, that like I said, I'll pick just 3 or 4 things as limitations of, I want to be in this kind of key or this kind of bow strokes on cello in particular, this kind of tempo, these kinds of rhythm patterns, these kinds of melodic fragments. And I'll try my best to keep those in my head and just play with those without ever writing the note down on the page, as a way of getting better at the mental practice of not being overwhelmed by the infinite palette that is modern electronic anything. And especially, doing electroacoustic music, you take all of the literature that's ever been written and you can do new things with it. And that infinite palette can be so paralyzing. And in the same way of learning to, create something in a discipline you're not familiar with, it's just that practice of sitting down and going, okay, the page is blank. Where do I start? What do I know about? And you just, whether you're a professional or an amateur or just even, somewhere beyond either of those ends of the spectrum, whether, you're buckethead and able to play any song ever and then improvise all of the canon of human history into something, that, or if you're just, a child, or if you're, 80 years old and are starting to have dementia problems, that, as I tell people all the time when I'm, moving instruments for them and all that, especially pianos, of, it's your grandkids may play. It's never too late for you to pick up one of their books and just go through it, just little bit by little bit. You got a degree. You graduated school when you were younger, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It's you've lived a life. You've raised a family. Of course you can learn to play a scale on an instrument or revisit your clarinet that you set down 30 years ago. And with those people, especially working with church orchestras, because I've played in many and as a regular and also as a guest, and it's just these people that you watch them over a course of 3 to 5 years, no matter what age they are, whether they started in middle school or they're now in their 70s, that when they play with the group and do either putting themselves into that situation where it's like a club kind of a feeling, where you go in and you're with like-minded people who are at similar levels, and you just sit there and you work with them. Those kinds of pure things work for some people. And I just encourage people to go explore those, or even if it's Toastmasters, and learning to write a speech and not be afraid to stand up and give it. But whether it's art for oneself or art for everybody around you, it's worth it. Therapeutically and educationally and everything in between, emotionally and all of it. And so I try to help push that, because it's good, no matter what field somebody's in, and the difference is real, and the science is backing it up, and always has. It's everybody's always known that like music improves math and science scores. It also improves reading. It also improves, depending on if somebody's not dyslexic or other things, but just broadly has a positive effect. In the same way that any other form of exercise or practice does. And so,
do it.
Just go do it. Just do it. Make stuff.
The last question I have, quite possibly the hardest one: cake or pie?
Oh, pie. Oh, I think about it and say, there's so many delicious cakes I've had, but just that pie and the different fillings you can put it, and all the varieties worldwide, and you can have meat pies and other stuff too, like shepherd's pie, and shepherd's pie is easily my favorite food of, it's not fancy. It's just a bunch of stuff in a pot, and you bake it in the oven, or a pan, and you bake it in the oven, and it's just delicious. But just, pie.
Great. Yeah. John, thank you for doing this with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So great. Where can we find you and your things?
On for the most part right now on Instagram and YouTube. I have a Twitch account and other stuff, but at the moment those are my most active. That Instagram, I've just gotten the best traction for posting music, funny enough, more than anything, because you're limited to a minute, but in that minute, people will actually listen to it.
Yeah.
And especially now that I've gotten to know more of the flow arts community on there, there's people out there that actually do listen to music. The hard part is figuring out how to get paid for it.
Yeah.
But you can find me on Instagram and YouTube and Twitch at Tune Select Go. I'll spell that out. Tune as in tune, like tuning an instrument. TUNE Select as it's spelled, and Go as it's spelled with no spaces.
Yeah.
And where I got that from was just the ready, steady, go kind of idea that athletes will use, but as a way of just kind of in that sense of just sit down and just create something. It's setting the palette, picking what you're going to do, and just doing it.
Nice.
And that's kind of become my work philosophy as an artist, and it made a really nice handle. So I really like that. And so
cool.
Yeah. And otherwise, you'll see, usually professionally, I go by J.R. Edwards on stuff. So you'll see that, Facebook and other things. But just find me anywhere. And if you can't find me somewhere, find somebody who can find me, because I'm just going to keep putting stuff out there, and hopefully something catches.
Yeah, exactly. Check your stuff out. It always looks really cool. It always sounds really cool. So like you're always making something interesting, or
trying to.
Something that sounds cool. And so it's just a lot of the times I do find myself going like, how did he, or
it's amazing how many times I ask myself
or
how.
sometimes why.
Yeah. And the answer to why is because just can, because in the practice of learning to be a better musician, artist, videographer, and all the rest of that, going out and doing it, like going to the Redwood Forest in California was, in an hour and a half, I took 400 plus pictures. When I was in the Mojave for about the same amount of time, it was the same thing of just, sitting down with a camera, because it's the Lumix GH5. And so it's just a full-on professional camera that's better than anything I have any right to have, but I did a lot of digging and found a good deal.
Nice.
And it was totally worth it getting that. It has amazing color. And just being able to take 6K photography and 4K cinema video is phenomenal. But, for me, I have a physics understanding of like what the f-stop is, and what, how focal points work and all of that. But this camera has all of that and more. Mm-hmm. And then on the digital side, it can do like polyfocus over 255 boxes that you can sit there and select like just different like leaves on a tree and have it be focal, points at different. It's crazy.
Yeah. Everything's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and so with that though, it's I took the pictures and did different settings on different preset parts of it so that I could just flip back and forth and see, okay, how does this change things? How does this change things? How does this change things? Because reading the manual and learning about the theory won't teach you how to do it practically. Yeah. And so there's a lot of just, you have to sit down and experiment if you're going to get better at expressing things the way that you want to the first time and not having to spend 10 hours in post editing a minute and a half of video.
Yeah.
As we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But yeah, again, thank you. Thank you for having me in your space. And
thank you. It's so nice to have you over. After I've known you for about a year now, give or take, and it's just finally having the time.
Yeah.
So
I'm Santiago Ramones.
And I'm Jonathan Edwards.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. There's a demo that you can download from Bandcamp. You can pay zero money or pay hundreds of dollars. I don't care. Well, thank you for listening to it. And there's also this podcast, which you can leave reviews on iTunes or Stitcher, or you can leave comments on YouTube or on my website. You can always interact and you can always say things and leave reviews because that helps a lot. I always end my podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.
I like it. Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.